In the past, it was a staple of kidnappings for the hostage to hold up a newspaper to prove that they're still alive. The problem with me is that I started to read the newspapers I was holding up, although I'm still, as you can judge by our social media overlords, in captivity. Nevertheless, I'll try my best to get what news I can out to you given the constraints. First up, stories on the domestic news front that I'm tracking. Your briefing begins with the headline. Utah's Sovereignty Act now allows the state to ignore and overrule unconstitutional federal actions. New legislation that was signed into law by Governor Spencer Cox in the state of Utah allows the Beehive State to reject, override, or otherwise nullify federal rules and decisions with which it disagrees. The Utah Constitutional Sovereignty Act establishes a legal framework for the state's legislature to prohibit the enforcement of any federal directive that is deemed to violate the principles of the state's sovereignty in Utah. It also contains detailed descriptions of such violations and what they might look like. Furthermore, the legislation limits the authority for requesting a concurrent resolution to the bill. It also requires the legislature to consult with the state attorney general regarding the potential impact of any concurrent resolution on litigation, including notice provisions that are to be made to tribal governments throughout Utah concerning any changes. Balancing power between state and federal sovereignty is an essential part of our constitutional system, Governor Cox said in a statement. The legislation gives us another way to push back on federal overreach and maintain that balance. What the states have to deal with is the fact that they essentially lost the Senate on the federal level of government. The Senate used to, of course, represent the interests of the states, right? And so the Senate had been pushing back against the globalists 100 years ago, and where the globalists wanted us to join the League of Nations, the Senate blocked it because they didn't want to, get rid of America's sovereignty. Where the globalists wanted us to join the International Court in The Hague, the Senate blocked it. So they decided to essentially regroup and figure out how to neutralize America's Senate so that America could be reabsorbed into the global grid. And they finally did that with the 17th Amendment. They changed the way that senators were installed. Originally, they were appointed in a two-step process. The citizens voted for the state legislators, and the state legislators appointed a senator. He didn't have to run. He wasn't popularly elected. He was supposed to be above politics, right? Kind of like Supreme Court justices. We don't vote on Supreme Court justices. They're not installed according to how popular they are, but how good they're supposed to be, right? They're supposed to be above politics, and so was the Senate. When they changed the Constitution in the 17th Amendment and made them popularly elected, now they became beholden to big interests. Like Ted Cruz complained about that, how he was ashamed of how much begging he had to do all day just to get money all the time from every corporation and every oligarch. So he spends all his time doing that rather than doing the business of his state. And that was as per plan, because now instead of answering to the people, you answer to someone like George Soros, from whom you need money to run your election. And this totally changed the power dynamic, the checks and balances. If you read John F. Kennedy's book, Profiles in Courage, he talks about how the nature of the Senate was changed. He said originally, in the original kind of draft of the Constitution, the president's cabinet was made up of senators, right? So the president didn't get to choose his own cabinet, his own, education secretary or his own immigration czar or any of this. It was senators from all over the country, basically, consisted of his cabinet, and this gave the states tremendous power in the executive branch. And since they changed the nature of the Senate, they basically had this propaganda campaign to convince you that, the Senate was just, a conjoined twin of the House of Representatives, that it was just, part of a legislature. But it wasn't supposed to be. It was supposed to be conjoined to the executive branch, like when the Senate and the president confirm ambassadors or Supreme Court justices together. So with these checks and balances removed, the states lost power, and the United States became a bureaucracy of highly centralized power like other nations, which takes us into international news. According to what the regime media is now saying, the primitive Houthis are knocking out underwater cables linking Europe to Asia. 4 underwater communications cables between Saudi Arabia and Djibouti have been struck out of commission in recent months, presumably as a result of attacks by Yemen's Iranian-backed Houthi rebels, according to an exclusive report in the Israeli news site Globes. The successful targeting of the 4 cables, which are believed to belong to the AAE-1, CECOM, EIG, and TGN systems, marks a serious disruption of communications between Europe and Asia. Most of the immediate harm will be absorbed by the Gulf states and India, Globe said. The British Empire, of course, had a talent for creating operatives and pretending that they were random local roughnecks, like when they created the Serbian nationalist movement before World War I to disrupt the Berlin-Baghdad Railroad and hurt their economic rival Germany, or when they created the Pan-Arab movement to destabilize the Ottoman Empire and collapse it from within. So are the Houthis being used in similar ways to disrupt China's New Belt and Road Initiative? History can be a great window onto what's happening today. Speaking of windows, that brings us into our News of the Weird segment. If you thought Bill Gates' Windows was a sweet spy tool, check out how physical windows can now be used to record you.
This company just created something straight out of Black Mirror. Zeiss just announced at CES that it could turn any transparent medium, like glass or plastic, into a functioning camera, and you wouldn't even know. The tech works by turning an entire pane of glass into a camera with a hidden sensor inside the material. That means you can turn a house window, a car windshield, or even the glass on a dining table into a smart device. Since the company also specializes in projecting images onto transparent materials, they can essentially create a see-through phone like on an episode of Black Mirror. While the benefits of the technology are obviously going to change how we see and use different devices, it also means that some of our worst fears could come true. Travelers worried about hidden devices capturing their private moments, especially those that stay in an Airbnb. I mean, during CES, we joked about hidden cameras in our Airbnb too, but if the owner had this tech, every window in the house could be part of the ultimate live streaming Big Brother setup. Even worse, these devices could masquerade as a standard window, like a cop car's rear window watching you use your phone while driving.
Are constitutional protections dead? If so, that offers up the perfect segue to our obituary segment. Bruce Newman, a New York antiques dealer once known as the Cecil B. DeMille of his profession for his outsized personality and extravagant wares, has died. He was 94. The cause of death was congestive heart failure, according to his daughter, Emily Greenspan. During his reign, Newell was in full, overwhelming flower by the 1980s, housed in a 5-story building on East 53rd Street near the East River, each floor teeming with 2 centuries worth of treasures, most costing upwards of 5 figures. The business was a glittering antiques mall to set designers, party planners, decorators, society lions, and Hollywood royalty. Vintage carousel horses? Check. Roulemont desks? Yes. Benches from the Paris Metro? Of course. French Victorian dining chairs swirled in bronze trim? No need to ask. Mr. Newman carried it all and in staggering amounts. Victorian wicker, French salon furniture, Art Deco, Art Nouveau, Gothic Revival, Biedermeier, Directoire, English arts and crafts, Renaissance and medieval pieces, and the quality camp or fantasy furniture he favored. Weird and whimsical pieces embellished with mythical creatures, chairs sprouting antlers, torchères bedecked with gargoyles, commodes atop griffin feet. Paul Rudnick, the playwright, screenwriter, and author, called the shop a wonderful cross between Hogwarts and the warehouse at the end of Citizen Kane. Bruce must be overjoyed being in that big warehouse in the sky. From there, he can doubtless see all the antiquities of the universe. At any rate, I'd like to thank you for watching the show, or as I like to call it, that suspicious gap in my resume. See you next time. Consider subscribing to my new podcast, Classic Paranormal. It's a clearinghouse for lost real-life accounts of true ghost stories. It's found on Apple Podcasts. Go there now if you're interested in enigmatic tales, chilling true accounts, chronicles from cases of the past that time has forgotten, but that the modern person who likes relaxing by a campfire swapping ghost stories might appreciate. As I said, the new podcast I'm launching is available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and there's a link in the description below on this video.